I've got a plan.
This is so literal. I picked Parasite this week because everyone loves Parasite,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just worth talking about for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours.
Yeah, practically perfect film. I can't even. I know you guys are gonna be bored out of your mind just listening to us being super fanboys about every single thing that happens in this movie, and also every decision that is, in a storytelling sense, in a directing sense, in an acting sense too. I mean, that's just diving into like the small portions of it. So we'll get in more detail
Yeah,
after.
and just for like a quick synopsis, just in case you haven't seen Parasite, which like, come on,
Blasphemous.
dude, what are you talking about? It's a film about a family that lives in a semi-basement, and their son gets opportunity to be a tutor, and they slowly but surely find jobs within the house of the rich people that they are trying to uh, infiltrate, I guess, in quotations. And it's a story about classism, and it's a social thriller, and it changes pace every act to keep you on your toes, and it's so much more than what the plot is, but the plot is so good itself, so it's hard to explain everything in one beat.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many layers to this film, both like physically, obviously,
Yeah.
metaphorically, and in all the aspects of this movie. And honestly, that was one of the most hype Oscars for me. I haven't watched that many, but I did tune in for that one, at least for the best picture. And boy, it deserves this win so much. And Bong Joon-ho deserves the recognition pretty much too, because I think he's been doing a lot of stuff. We've been diving into a lot of his movies recently, and they're all top notch, if not like great
Yeah.
pieces. Yeah.
No, like Parasite winning Best Picture was probably the last good thing to ever happen.
Ever.
Ever.
What about that cheesecake guy?
All right, well, yeah, when we got cheesecake, I guess. Yeah, you're right.
You guys got to know
You're
about
right.
the lore of this podcast.
Yeah, I'm sure
No
you guys-
context in these references.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys watched the Nicolas Cage review, didn't you?
Oh yeah, all 15 of y'all.
Yeah, all 15. I don't even know if it's 15.
Really? Okay, that was my bad. But
anyway,
yeah, back to Parasite. What was you? Let's talk about our first experiences with it. I think that's a good place to start.
Sure, and I mean, this movie is so great to rewatch. It's got so much rewatchability because you're so on the edge of your seat, and there's so much detail going on in every scene. But at the same time, I'm never gonna forget the first time I watched this. Like some films, it's like the first time you watch it is very special because of the thriller aspect and what was going on, and I didn't know what was going to happen next, right? I didn't even know. I kind of thought it would be like sci-fi when I came in the theater. I didn't know much about the movie. I kind of avoided the trailers and everything. So I didn't know what was in the basement at all and like what was going to happen, and I was so pleasantly surprised by every single occurrence, and just the way like my heart was racing during the film is something that I'll never capture again with this movie, and it's like that high I'm always chasing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel the same way. I did watch like a trailer, maybe two, but it definitely did not dive into like none of the trailers, as I know of, dives into like the latter half of the film, and I think that's like the best way to make trailers if you're forced to make trailers at all. I guess.
I mean, every movie's forced to make trailers.
There's this other movie I was watching a video on, and like they were just doing like the vibes of the movie instead of like an actual trailer. But anyways, my point my point is that like I got into it thinking that it would be like thriller. I was thinking I can't even really remember what my expectations were, but I had heard the buzz around, almost like Everything Everywhere All at Once. And I was excited to see it, but I was thinking it was more like a thriller, maybe like a little bit of Class or something like that. But this movie has so many twists and turns, and I think it is so well navigated in its characters and their motivations and what unfolds. It's so smooth of a ride that while you're being twisted and turned, it almost doesn't feel like twists and turns. It almost feels like, yeah, this is the natural progression of what happens, you know? Even though the stakes are like totally flipped now, it's like a totally different scenario. And I think that's the first thing that I thought of on my first watch was this mastery of escalating circumstances. Many of the circumstances that happen in the movie can be like full movies on their own, you know? So that's why you go in and you watch it and you're like, oh, so the whole movie is going to be about this family infiltrating. And then once you find out that they infiltrate within maybe like the first 30 minutes to an hour or something like that, then you're like, okay, maybe this is like them infiltrated, but they're going to keep trying to hide and things are going to happen. But then you go to the basement and then it's like a whole different type of heart racing situation, I guess. And they do it again, and then you have like the bow of the end with the classism and the smell and the bitterness, I guess, and you know, the infighting of the lower class while the upper class has their little party. And I think that that is just like the perfect way to end things too. It's almost kind of a basic kind of structure of a movie which is also what adds to the rewatchability in my opinion, is because through and through this movie is so entertaining to watch. Like there's not a lull moment. I know there's movies where there's like a lot to dissect in like themes and like characters and world building and stuff like that, but it can be boring. This movie has got all of that and it is so exciting.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I like to say about this film is my usual like 3 or 4 sentence review is like, this is like if you made a textbook about how to make a movie, it would just be watching Parasite. You know,
Yeah.
it's like exactly what you'd expect a perfect movie to be, and it's like it does everything in its power to be great, and every single individual aspect of this film is truly great on its own merit. Not like good. Like it's not like this film has no flaws. It's beyond that. It has nothing that's good. It's only great in every single area that you're trying to look at, you know, like the directing. I mean, you got to be kidding me. Like writing is brilliant. I mean, the subject matter is poignant and impressive, and it's like a great message that people need to hear. And also the acting and the set design, the music, you know, you could just go on and on. It just rolls off your tongue how many things you can say is great about this film, which is one of the reasons why I love it, because like you say, it's a basic-ish story or like story structure, and they just do it they just execute it in the way that is best you could possibly do it.
Yeah, and one of the things I really want to highlight in this review is the humor of Bong Joon-ho and Korean cinema, I would say. For me personally, I'm not like the 100% advocate of that type of tonal variance that Korean films tend towards, but there are multiple times in many movies and many movies that I really like, but in this film specifically, I feel like the humor just works out so well that it adds to the relatability of the family and the naivety of the rich family in a way that doesn't make it seem like you're telling like a really scripted joke, but it's more like peering into these people's lives in specific moments of their situation that gets highlighted that makes it really funny. Like for example, as the family starts making a lot of money earlier in the film, there was a guy who's like peeing, and the dad is like, well, what can you do, whatever, you know, like we could go out there, he'll like he'll be, I don't know, he'll pee more or something like that.
Yeah,
I forget.
yeah.
But once they start getting like power and money, I guess money slash power slash standing in society, then the two boys in the family, the two guys in the family, go out there and like throw water, and it's just so funny, and it misses him, and it like splashes on the son's face, I think, or was it vice versa? But anyways, yeah, it's just a beautiful slow motion scene that just captures the heart and the change of the family, that or the change in their attitude that occurs when they get a little bit more money, or a little bit more, like, the confidence that one gets when they start to make more money, and the the degeneracy, it's not the right word, but the dejectedness of them in the beginning when they didn't have a lot of money.
Oh yeah, it's definitely different. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, and I think one thing that works really well is the chemistry in the family
Yeah.
itself. Like what they do with that is, I feel like they're a real family. It just they capture that so well, and whatever they're going through, they have that kind of atmosphere, and it's very interesting the way that they rely on each other, and the way you look at each of their individual relationships. They hold up, and it does a great job in the writing of capturing that. Depending on the scene, it always takes time to let you know what the family dynamic is in each scene, no matter what else is going on. Literally, it's like, if this is like a thriller, or like, the scene where you find out that everyone has finally infiltrated the home, and the daughter's like, don't interrupt me next time, or something like that. It's like these characters are very vibrant on their own, yet they have great chemistry with each other as well.
Yeah. I mean, the best part is like them. Well, one of the best parts is them acting like themselves, pretending to be the workers, like, around the rich family. One of the only times that the father and mother are like kind of like messing around and like intimate is like when they're right in front of the parents of the rich kids, and he like grabs her ass really and stuff like that. That kind of small moments kind of show the amount of time that goes through as well, because I feel like the movie does show things happening really fast, but it actually takes a lot of planning and a lot of like slow information gathering and stuff like that. And so little moments like that show how comfortable they are around the I think it's the Park family, right, that are the rich family.
Yeah.
And so it shows a little bit more of the passage of time. It doesn't seem as quick and everything's happening all at once, that the scenes may lead you to believe. But there are subtle things that show that they put in a lot of work to infiltrate this, a lot of planning, especially the cuts back and forth. Those are like electric scenes, where they cut between like, oh yeah, she was coughing, maybe she has tuberculosis, and it's just, and then the son directing the dad when he like goes too far with his acting. I know that's a super hilarious joke in Korea. And that, along with the other one where they're at the pizza place and they like this hot sauce packet, bro.
Yeah, no, they do really good with montages, like
Yeah.
the editing and the music really work well together, especially when they're like, I think especially when they're like working on infiltrating the house. I'm like, it's so fun. It's so fun to watch them do that, because you're rooting for them so hard, and when they finally do it, it's like, ugh, fuck yeah. And it leads to like such a high that you're with the family when the tension comes, and when like strings are being pulled and they have to keep themselves at the top of the hill. Your heart is like so strained, because how hard it was that it took them to get there, and then when it all starts to fall down, you're like, oh my gosh, like this is such a stressful scenario, because they did so well at getting themselves into the house, but now that they're all in the house, like the stakes are so high, and they do a great job at furthering the plot while also heightening the stakes and they do both at the same time in a way that it's just good writing, like, I mean, there's a lot of different ways I could say it's good writing, but it's just very good writing.
Yeah, the montage shows that they put a lot of like work and thought into it, and so you yourself feel like there's a lot to lose not only like their jobs and that kind of stuff, and things if it just cut to that, but the montage is like they meticulously did every single thing, and so now they have this perfect little structure that they built together. It's like, I don't know, it's like watching a person create or like build a house of cards rather than just seeing the house of cards and then seeing maybe it get like blown or something and wobble. But you watch someone build the house of cards, it's like you put in another card and you're like, oh shit, man, is it gonna fall now, is it gonna fall now? And now that it's perfect, you're like so invested into it that if the wind's blowing, you're like, oh man, like, and it sets you up to just be at the peak amount of empathy and rooting for and attention when things start to go wrong. And I mean, like, even the tension of like the top scene where it's just a little bit of blood on the paper. I know I was watching one of the trailers, and one of the major features of the trailer is the park mom walking up the stairs and like covering her mouth. And for sure, I don't exactly remember what I thought, but I could totally see myself being like, oh man, she's walking up and like they're just like murdering each other. It just seems like such an intense scene because she's like that acting right there. And so even commenting on like being rich and how you don't have to deal with a lot of issues, so these like small issues are just like really big to you, you know. For example, the son getting scared at night and that being like put up into such a big deal, you know, that later on they're like, oh, we don't care about these people that got stabbed, let's rush this kid to the hospital, you know. So it totally ties together with the theme, and also it just so works that the tension is like that, and yet they're only like showing like, oh man, she's coughing up a little blood, man, and the mom is like, I'm about to pass out, this is so insane.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and if we're sticking with the writing for a second, you know, it's like the writing does very well, and this is something we talked about last episode, which, you know, if you guys haven't seen, you should watch it. But we talk a lot about layering in writing, you know, like saying multiple things with the same scene.
Yeah.
And this movie is like the epitome of this, you know. It's like they poke fun at it, right? Like, this is so metaphorical. Like, that's one of my favorite lines, like, ever in a film. Yeah. I don't know why it just sticks with me so much, the way that they were able to handle everything in the film being metaphorical, but not taking that metaphor too seriously. Yeah. Like, understanding that it's a metaphor and playing with it a little bit, but at the same time, it's brilliant writing because truly everything in this movie is a metaphor. Every single scene you can find a metaphor. It's like, whether it's the actual levels of the house fighting in the basements, or like, you know, like the I don't remember the name of the guy, but the guy who's been in the basement for years, he's like, I feel like I've always lived here, you know. And it's like, well, what does that mean, you know? I know what that means, right? And it just does that consistently, and it's very streamlined and focused, and I think that's very good for a film to have one point and to, I mean, oftentimes you can have multiple points, but I think it's usually best if you have one idea and like one focus, and then you do a great job at painting this picture and sticking with what your moral of the story is. And this movie does that very well.
I think that the withholding of information is also like a really strong aspect of the writing, because many times there are films where there's like the secret that maybe the main character doesn't know, or like the side main character doesn't know that the main character knows, and everything like that. But this movie has like a whole family that doesn't know, which also works with the theme, but like you have to balance these two tensions as well. You have the tension of the families fighting each other, and now you have to have them fight each other without showing the other family too, which leads to one of the best moments where the housekeeping lady like runs up the stairs, and then the mom just like kicks her. It's like boom, and that thud, I swear they brought up the decibels on that thud because it like shocked
they had
me.
to,
yeah
man.
In the theater it was like a hold your breath thud, you know. And
Yeah, because the music's so loud for that entire scene, and then it just stops, so you can just hear dunk. It's like, oh, that's
Damn.
brutal.
Yeah. And as well, like I think the acting really sells the writing as well. I don't know how the casting, or like not exactly sure about the past roles that these characters or these people have had, these actors and actresses have had, except for the main character. I forget his name.
Song Kang-ho.
Yeah, Song Kang-ho. He's, super famous and he's been in a bunch of stuff.
He's the best.
Yeah.
I love him
But
so much.
they embody the writing of their characters so much, and I think no more is it as apparent as the daughter and her coolness that she brings to the character, because that's the only reason why her little jingle before ringing the doorbell just like went so viral, because she just delivered it in the most like cool way. And all of the characters really not only work well together, but they really embody the characters that they were given, and I think they elevated the writing even more. I thought that was great.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I got a cough. Yeah, no, I mean, I would say I think all the actors were great, and the acting was phenomenal. If I were to give a shout out to 3 performances, it would be Song Kang-ho and the daughter, which unfortunately I can't remember her name. We don't have their names in front of us right now. We did on the episode before, and then it got corrupted, so we're doing this again. But anyway, and then the third one would be, I think, the rich mom. I think she was very good at acting as well. I think
I loved her.
I just loved her performance. She played it so well, and it was so convincing. Those 3 definitely killed it. And I think with films like this, like, I love it when, and this is a tribute to the directing, really, when everything just flows together and meets each other so nicely, like how the writing can make the acting better. It's like the chicken and the egg, kind of. It's like these things both elevate each other, and then the music can elevate that, or the editing can elevate this. It's like not only do these all work well individually, but they work well in conjunction with each other, which is such a testament to Bong Joon-ho and the way he directs films. At this point, he's like, I mean, he's been a master for like 20 years.
Yeah.
You can just see it with this movie.
I mean, he's been doing great work in Korea. We just, I guess, more Americans or more the mainstream Hollywood has just now been introduced to him.
Yeah, Parasite was what introduced me.
Yeah.
I mean, embarrassing enough to say,
I did watch Snowpiercer before, but
I did watch Snowpiercer.
But even that, like, he was definitely working before. That's the only reason why he was able to make Snowpiercer with Chris Evans. He couldn't have been some nobody to be able to pull that talent and that notoriety.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah. I think everything really adds together, and that's the reason why it's so hard to even think about bad things in this movie, because I feel like everything, it almost is like a gravity well, and I think Bong Joon-ho is like that gravity, that although these things are all great on their own, and they take a lot of talent from these other artists too, like set designers and like composers, even though they're using like classical music and that kind of stuff, they work, but he like draws it all in, and he like makes it click in these puzzle pieces, and I feel like that is the epitome of directing. I don't exactly remember who won Best Director though.
He did.
Oh really?
Yeah,
awesome. Well, it was deserved.
Yeah, Parasite swept the board that year. It was so cool.
Yeah. But to highlight some of the other stuff, I did want to talk about, we did talk a little bit about the editing, but honestly, never enough for any of these aspects. But the set design too. I loved that they built this house just so that all of the specific shots that they wanted to happen could happen in like a space. Like, for example, they built the staircase so that there is the wall between it, so that you could see into the dining room, so that the characters could sometimes be talking, and then other characters can be like peering behind, and then like walk down really loudly to like signal them and stuff like that. So they built it all with that notion in mind, and that, I don't know how he like storyboarded maybe really heavily in this movie or something like that. Maybe not, but that takes a lot of imagination and forethought to know exactly visually how you want things to interact and how you want secrets to be told to other characters, and then to build a set and know like how you want to design a house just so that you can shoot specific scenes that show these minute and subtle character moments is insane.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and I totally agree with you with the set design because like it's some of the best ever. And not to mention the house just looks really cool. You know what I mean?
They
Like,
go to the tour and they're like, this was built by this insane architect, and you're like, yeah, yeah. I wonder if
Totally.
they actually consulted an architect maybe, because like it
You
looks
gotta.
so beautiful. That
Oh my gosh.
whole glass like wall, and then the storm that comes in. Oh man.
Yeah, everything they
Perfect.
do with that house is just brilliant. But just to go back to the directing real quick, because I wanted to say one thing on it, but I forgot it at the time.
No worries.
There's like kind of an analogy I have for it, which is, hear me out on it, right? But I play jazz music sometimes. Like I'm a bit of a jazz musician, um, and there's this way that I look at jazz solos and people that do jazz solos, and basically there's young people in the way that they approach solos, like me, like amateurs basically,
Uh-huh.
and they often play very fast and very very loose, and like they have something to prove. They've got a chip on their shoulder. Like there's like this energy to it that doesn't play with the song necessarily, but it's like I want to prove like my worth as a musician,
Yeah.
which is what I do as well. But there's veterans of jazz music, and they don't have the same kind of technical solos a lot of the time as younger musicians do. But what they do have, and what is stronger in every case, is they're able to play solos and they're able to play notes that fit and flow with the music, and they're able to play melodic beats that go far beyond any amount of notes that you can play on a piece.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what I feel like with Parasite and with Bong Joon-ho, especially, and as far as his direction goes, like he's very calm and collected, and he doesn't have a chip on his shoulder, and it just flows. It's just, it lives by itself, and every decision he makes is for the film and not for himself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not something you see every day, especially in America. We've got very vibrant visual styles, or all of these like wacky angles or things like that. Bong Joon-ho is he's got his own personal style, absolutely.
Yeah.
But he's always looking for the film, and he's got such a calm and comfortable, he's got his finger on the pulse.
Mm-hmm. I think there is like an appreciation for all types, but this is the most fun and appreciating type of style that I really like. 'Cause, you have your Wes Andersons, where they have like a meticulous style in the way that they want to prove things and want to say things visually, and most of the time the story is almost secondary.
And I'm sure we both agree, like, Wes Anderson's really cool.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, of course. I love Wes
like,
Anderson. Yeah. But I think your analogy also made me think of another thing about people who are a little bit more comfortable perhaps doing like a jazz solo or something like that, is they do things like pause, and they do things like hold on to things a little bit longer instead of just like trying to play the most impressive melodies that you possibly can. And I think that one of the highlights of this movie is the pause that Bong Joon-ho allows the audience and the story, that happens right when they infiltrate fully, and then they have their dinner on the table of the parks and sitting on their couch and staring out their window. A lot of things happen in this scene that I absolutely adore. There's a few more longer takes and a little bit less cutting, so that you can see a real-time interaction between the family. There's the hilarious jokes, extravagant like pushing of everything off the table, and a lot of philosophical talk too. They talk about like what it means to be nice if you have money, if you don't have money, um, how much enjoyment one gets from just having that scene singularly, whereas like other people like the parks have it like every day, almost taken for granted type aspect. And even like the daughter who says like, quit worrying about them, worry about me, or worry about us, you know, that whenever people who have little get a little something, they kind of have this empathy for others that's built in. So they kind of be like, oh, they appreciate it. They think about others who are worse, or they think about themselves when they were worse off, you know? But she kind of shuts that down. She's like, why are we trying to like sympathize? Why are we trying to think about them, bro? Like, we're not living like this. This is just like once, you know? Like, this is just like a moment. And it's nice to appreciate it, and let's appreciate it. Let's not like think about. And also, it almost kind of descends the father figure into like thanking the parks. And I loved the dichotomy between him and the underground husband, and the way their storylines really parallel each other, you know?
No, yeah, for sure. And I mean, like, this is another testament to the writing, as there is a million. But, like, if we're talking about that scene, I always think about how it starts raining while they're talking, and their discussion happens in the rain. I'm like, and I think about the rain every time. I'm like, oh, wow, this is such good ambiance for this discussion. It's like this just feels right that the rain is here. And then they call, when all of the action is going on, they're like, yeah, we're coming home because it's been raining all day. And it's like, of course, like, of course, you know?
Yeah.
And like what the writing does is like, they give you things, but they don't tell you what they're giving you. They don't say what it is they're giving you, but they're giving it to you. So that I always feel like I'm one step behind, and if I was just like a little smarter, like I could understand the story. It's not like one of those movies. It's like, haha, we got you, twist ending, like you would never know, and like you literally would never know. Like, it's just like a twist for the sake of twist. But this film, it's never that. They always show what they're gonna do before they do it, and I just never catch on anyway. And I feel like I'm kind of dumb, but I think most people don't catch on either, you know? It's like a very great film technique. It's like magic. It's like movie magic.
Yeah. I think that, along with what's happening in the scene, is just so captivating that you don't have a lot of wandering mind to think about the other maybe foreshadowing things. And I think that is an incredible writing ability to be able to foreshadow things that like, you know, may or may not be pretty subtle versus very obvious, but you don't even think about them because you're just so focused on what's going on in the forefront, because what's going on in the forefront is so interesting too. And I think we might have brought this up on the last podcast, but though one of the other scenes that I think heavily does this is the focus on the old housekeeper, and whenever she gets fired, she like walks away, you know, like in the shot, and it kind of lingers on that a little bit longer than you'd think. And that, along with the fact that she is such a huge part of this house, it's almost inevitable and foreshadowing that she's gonna come back. Like, she's such an integral part of the house, and she's been there for so long. She knows everything about like the structure and everything like that, quote unquote, obviously.
Yeah.
And yet you still kind of get surprised when she comes back. You're like, oh man, this problem, I thought we got rid of this problem, now she's back, you know. And of course that like sets into the third act and everything like that. But yeah, that kind of foreshadowing things that are happening in the background that that are even neglected, I would say, a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It almost contrasts the last podcast in the sense that things that are happening in the forefront, there isn't really a forefront because everything's going on everywhere.
Yeah.
And this one is like there are things going on in the background, but what he's focusing on is so interesting that you barely pay attention to the background. And I think that's just such an interesting contrast from these two movies.
Totally. And I think it says a lot about Bong Joon-ho as a filmmaker, because he's very much a genre filmmaker, you know. He's into thrillers, like detective movies.
Yeah.
Like monster. Well, oh yeah, he's got The Host, so like
Yeah.
real monster
Yeah.
movies too. I was thinking like, and then he's got a lot of different genres.
Yeah.
He works in
Mysteries generally, thrillers and mysteries. Yeah.
thriller. Yeah, he does I mean, he did Snowpiercer
Yeah, that's true.
and Okja, and like all of his films, they have like a flair to them, and especially for thrillers like this, it would make sense that you're hiding some things and you're keeping some things away, but try to show people like little secrets, like, and it goes to show like he's very much a master of the thriller genre. He's been doing this a couple of times now, and well, I mean, he's been a master ever since he started. Like, Memories of Murder is like, oh my god, it's so good, dude.
Actual masterpiece. If you guys haven't watched it,
Yeah, please watch Memories of Murder. Watch every Bong
yeah,
Joon-ho
they're
movie.
all good. None of them are a waste of time. Like
Yeah.
The Host was great. Mother was great. I don't remember much about Okja. But
Okja's really Jake Gyllenhaal. Okja is so good.
yeah,
He's
Joey
so
always
good.
talks about Jake Gyllenhaal and Okja.
So funny, he's so good. Yeah, he has a lot to give with those thriller like performances, you know, and you can just tell like he knows what he's doing.
Mm-hmm. I think now shifting into a little bit of my thoughts on some of the interesting connections that I was thinking about during this, I don't fucking know, like 15th watch, 20th watch. But I still think of new things every single time. And I think what I mostly focused on in this watch was the connection between, that I brought up earlier, connection between the dad and the basement husband. The way that the hope of economic growth is shown in the hope of moving outside of the basement. I think one of the most powerful lines that pushed this notion is whenever he has the guy tied up, and he asks him like, why do you live like this? Like, is this not like degrading? Is this not like I don't know, demeaning, that kind of stuff? And he's like you said, like, I don't really know much anymore. And at the same time, it's like, this is enough to me. You know, I just praise Mr. Park, and I get my small rations of food, and I live in this basement versus the sub-basement of the family. And he also asks him, like, what's your plan? And he's like, I don't know, man. I'm just going to stay here as long as I possibly can. Which contrasts the dad's character, which he says, like, I've got a plan. And then later he's talking to his son while they're falling asleep, and he's like, well, I mean, I don't really have a plan. I just tell you guys I have a plan. But if you have a plan, then things won't work out. And that's like so depressing, but also a bit of showing of what it means to push in this scenario. I think there is a debate at the end whether the hope and having a plan can fight economic situations that are beyond one's control. Whether you're born in a poor family, you can forge your way out or not. I know there's a lot about that American dream where you can start anywhere and you can get anywhere. But yeah. I think nowadays people are a lot more aware that situations are a lot more constricting than you think they are. You don't have as much of a possibility of being poor and then becoming a millionaire as you think there would be, you know? And so the ambiguity of the end is really interesting. But also the fact that he tells his son that he has a plan, or he tells his children that he has a plan, but he doesn't really. And then the son at the very end, I think, ends on a good note where he recognizes everything that happens to him, but he still chooses to create a plan, and that little hope adds just a twinge of satisfaction and not desolation at the end that I totally appreciated. I feel like that's the way you have to go through life, because m- maybe if you think about, man, like there's no way to get to like stardom or something, or there's a lot of luck that takes to become like a millionaire. You can take that information and be really dejected, but you still have to live life. And I think if you're going to live life, you might as well hope that you might be able to, even against all odds that you logically think of or read about, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's a very Bong Joon-ho like perspective.
Yeah, he's not like the saddest filmmaker ever.
Yeah, he's usually he gives you a little something.
Yeah.
He's like, all right, well, here you guys go. It's like not all like it's not all terrible, you know, but he's very he's very good at painting that picture. And like what you're talking about with the plan, I totally see that as well. And like it just goes to show like it would be the dad that like he's saying he's got this plan because you want your kids to believe that like your father knows what he's doing.
Yeah,
Even though it's often like, you know, adults don't know what you're doing. And like, of course, if you're in a situation like that and you've been knocked down so many times, it's like the plan is to keep going. Like it's just like you're trying to survive. You're just trying to get day to day. So it's not. He does a great job of displaying that kind of that difficulty and that kind of privilege that people have. Like it's a privilege to be able to plan ahead. You know what I mean? And he does a great job of describing that, especially in like the stadium scene and what he does with the rain. Really, you know, like I know we haven't talked about it yet, but everyone always talks about it because it's so poignant when like the rain's going down and then the rich lady's like, oh, it's so beautiful out today because it was raining. But then you get to see like how it impacted so many people, and something that can be so desolate, but it impacts people differently depending on your class. And it's such a poignant example of that, and that scene is one of my favorites in the movie.
Mm-hmm. I kind of do want to ask you, like, who do you think the villain of the movie is? I mean, like, if you had to choose one, obviously it would be easy to say, like, oh, there's no villain. They're all, like, human characters.
No, it's easy for me to say it's the rich people.
Oh, okay. That's super interesting because I was listening to another podcast on this movie by Beyond the Screenplay. I know they're a lot bigger than us, so if you guys know them, tag them or do something. I want to talk to them. But anyways, they talk about how the structure of the movie follows this family that you're rooting for, and then eventually there's a turning point where you find that who you're rooting for is the bad, quote unquote, bad people of the movie, which is really interesting. And I kind of still agree with you, but more because I'm like, it takes morally gray actions that people need to take whenever they're in like.
Yes.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Oh,
Sorry.
yeah. Just
I gotta plug my computer in again. I literally forgot again.
It's a tradition. Okay. But I feel like whenever you're faced with harsher situations, you're faced with harsher decisions, which make decisions a lot more sympathetic. So I never felt like the main characters were the main family were becoming villains or becoming bad, but they were talking about how morally, if you take like a moral rigid stance, they are getting worse and worse, and they are like taking advantage of people more and getting hubris and getting prideful and getting comfortable and everything like that. Whereas the Park family, their worst flaw is just ignorance, you know? They never really do anything specifically bad. Nothing really even happens that they're aware of until like the very end. So they were talking about there was this journey of the characters of the main family, how you get attached to them, and then you watch them do more and more morally ambiguous actions, but you're stuck with them already, and so you're taken on this journey of being like, huh, like, is this like too far or something like that? And I was kind of wondering if you had any thoughts like that, or if you're full
Well,
on.
I might have some strong thoughts about that. Just for the sake of like, it'd be interesting to say this. I think that's a very small-minded opinion to take. These Beyond the Screenplay guys, like, you're wrong. Like,
oh man, we're starting beef.
Yeah,
we're starting beef.
I guess
them.
so.
Shout them out.
Yeah, fuck, how many subscribers they got?
Well,
fuck them all. It doesn't matter.
They've got at least 1,000 in the Patreon for Beyond the Screenplay, but the actual channel is called Lessons from the Screenplay, and it's got like a couple million.
Oh, a couple million?
Yeah.
Yeah, fuck those guys. Anyway,
they're
like,
good. They're a good channel though.
Nah. But yeah, like, to me, it's like I never once felt morally compromised rooting for the poor, and I never felt like the movie did that either. I always felt like the movie, it never wavered on who the movie asked you to root for, and it was always asking you to root for this semi-basement family.
Yeah.
Because of the economic position of the world and the position that these people are fighting for, and the absolute unjust nature of their situation, like, I could say genuinely, like, from a moral circumstance, that rich people deserve to die.
Understandable.
And
eat the rich.
Eat the rich. Like, literally, that's a genuine stance you could take, and it would be not crazy to me. Actually, that's the stance I take. I mean, on some levels. And so when one of them gets stabbed, I'm like, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
like, I was cheering for that to happen. And stuff like that, because you can't make any change as someone with less economic status, like, unless you do something, then nothing will happen. And I think that's the main take of this film, is that, you know, the rich are ignorant and they don't understand. They're always trying to keep away from the lower class, and that is unequivocally unmoral, unjust, and, like, I don't know the word. It's like unforgivable. Like, that's an unforgivable sin to do that. And so when they are doing these acts, it's like, yeah, obviously these are terrible. Like, you don't want to be knocking a lady down the stairs. Like, obviously that's not good in like a bubble, which is why I consider that a small-minded view. Is like, in a bubble, yes, that's bad, but considering the entire world and the story of what's going on, yeah, these circumstances happen because the rich are taking and hoarding all of this from the poor, that they have to fight each other for crumbs. You know what I mean? So that's kind of my take on it. So basically, I just want to start some beef.
No, yeah, I think I mostly agree, because I never actually thought of it as, like, getting more morally gray as they went on, or they were doing more harsh things. I always thought that is what you need to do in those scenarios, that's just how you have to survive, and that's why I never thought that was a condemnable act. I think there was a little bit about, like, comfortability and that kind of stuff, but in those aspects I point more towards, well, whenever anyone gets any bit of power and, like, and money, they go through this, and I don't know, there's a lot of human nature in there. But I kind of want to pose another question, is how come there is, I mean, beyond, if you have thoughts beyond, like, just this is the main character, so that's why, how come you generally don't, or the audience generally doesn't root for the even lower than sub-basement, the basement people instead? You know, out of everyone, they are the most down on their luck, or struggling people, and yet we find ourselves fine with the main characters um, essentially killing them to survive.
Yeah, I mean that's a more kind of interesting like narrative question, I feel like, because it kind of like on like the biggest level, my first answer is like, yeah, it's probably because they're the main
Yeah,
characters.
that's
You
what I was
know,
thinking too.
it's like you spend so much time with these people, like getting them to like infiltrate the house. I'm like, I want you to keep the house. You
Yeah.
know, I like these people.
Yeah.
This family's really cool. And like when I see the basement guy smash the son with a rock, I'm like, oh, that's fucking
Bro,
brutal.
he does it again. He's just like, let me just do it again, and his body just jerks. Man.
Yeah.
Damn, ouch.
But at the same time, to me anyway, I'm never rooting against those people. It's always like, damn.
Someone's gotta get the short end of the stick, you know.
Yeah, well, it's like, yeah, like when they get killed or when they hurt the family, either way, like
Yeah.
when they're fighting, it's like, I'm like, damn, this is like an unfortunate situation. Like everyone loses here, and it's not that I'm rooting for the family to win, but at the same time, like I kind of am because they're the main characters.
Mm-hmm.
But in the back of my head, I'm always like, this isn't the real obstacle, but it kind of is the real obstacle. It's just very morally gray. It's not like I'm rooting for the family, but I'm not rooting against who they're fighting against, right?
Yeah.
So that's my convoluted thoughts on it. I don't know. What do you think about it?
So my thoughts on this is, I think there's a really interesting aspect of hope and change and mobility that really forces the audience. No, it doesn't force the audience. It advocates for the audience on one end than the other. And I think there's a little interesting parallel with Songs from the Second Floor. And as I'm thinking about this, I'm asking like, oh, well, why does Roy Anderson make the main character the dad rather than maybe making the main character the oldest son, the one that just sits and, does nothing? And one of the things that people like to see is they like to see character change. They like to see like movement. They like to see hope, aspirations, and that kind of stuff. And I think that is a little bit of what pushes the audience more towards the main character family, even though I still agree with you that it's mostly like maybe like 90% because like they're the main characters, obviously.
Yeah.
But tackling that theme that I was talking about earlier, it would be really hard to put your hopes on the couple that has no aspirations, that has nowhere to go. You want people who want things to succeed, and that is the same reason as why in the Roy Anderson film we get to follow this person. People who are super stagnant are great in a storytelling sense as like a side influence to the main character rather than being like the main character. And I honestly can't really think of that many movies that has like a stagnant character as the main film. Like some maybe like Melancholia, which for the mainstream audience would like hate, like Tommy would just hate that movie. If like, so I think that is a really interesting what's it called, reiteration of the themes of hope, planning, and how that adds to the fact of us liking, rooting for, and also sympathizing with the people, liking and rooting for the main character's family, but also sympathizing with the couple, because it's like once your sub-basement becomes basement, then you're like, you're done for, like there's no going back from there. So it's like this sadness and sympathy for the couple, but then this tension of watching this family claw and try to keep away from becoming like a basement family, and that's like what we root for. But that would be a lot lessened if you didn't have a showing of where they could end up, you know.
Yeah, I mean, and this is yet another testament to the quality of the film, is that we can talk about these things so deeply, because, you know, a lot of films give me the idea that, like, maybe I'm looking too far into this, you know, like, maybe, like, it's not that deep. But this movie is not one of those, you know. It's like, it's probably that deep. It's probably this well thought of. It's probably, like, this well discussed in every scene, in every, like, moment, in every part of time, because it's just so... I just give it the benefit of the doubt, because everything is so metaphorical.
Yeah.
You know? And, I totally agree with you. And, you know, just to go a little bit past that, a couple, like, shout outs I want to give before we start to wrap it up.
Yeah.
I just want to talk about the music real quick, just because that piano score, you know?
Yes.
And, like, especially the very end, like, all of it's great. And it's actually a little more campy and, like, bombastic than I remembered it being before, which is good. Like, I didn't think that's bad at all, but the piano score at the beginning and the end, especially, like, from the semi-basement window, I will... Oh my gosh! Like, I can't even. There's no words. It's just so good. It's so calm and peaceful. And yes.
No, I was just saying I have no idea why, but it almost kind of reminds me of like the Social Network theme, like.
Because it's both piano.
No. No. How could you say that to me? But I just wanted to interject. What were you saying?
No, oh, well, I mean, shit. I don't have anything. I thought you were saving me.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I think one of my favorite parts is, like, when they, I don't know, following this type of theme of, like, traveling down, they play this descending melody of, like, simple melodies as they're, like, going down during the rain, going down the stairs. And I think that along with the set design needs to be shouted out again, because I feel like I don't know if he was just listening to classical music and he's like, I just like this piece or something like that, or maybe he was like listening to it while he was writing, or maybe he like based the entire thing on the song or something like that, but it just fits so perfectly, the orchestral that goes up into the climax, and then the descend down that happens like later on.
Oh yeah.
I know there's more, I guess, room to create your own piece that goes along with the descending thing, but nevertheless, I feel like it totally hones in on the exact same tonal message that the whole score gives. It wasn't that like, this is a classical portion of this movie, and then, I don't know, this is like a rock portion of the movie where they like totally switch the soundtrack, or like they totally switch to something else, and the whole thing is like just different genres. It melds super well together, even though he's utilizing classical music to such a loud degree. Like, he turns that thing up, man. Generally, that's like used to like accent by using classical music. Almost reminds me of the use of classical music at the very end of Portrait of a Lady on Fire, or like the whole thematic of the thing.
Oh,
you know?
my gosh, they do music so well in that movie, which we'll be talking about in another episode coming soon. But anyway,
but that, along with him building the entire little community so that he could flood it, so that he could get that immaculate bird's eye view shot of them floating down. And yeah, I think those are two of the highlights that I wanted to talk about before we wrap things up on the music and the set design, because there's more than just the house. Even though the house is utilized, like every corner of it is utilized to like perfection in like shot composition, and like informational with characters and everything like that. But when they move out of the house, it's still great set design, still great music, and even like, you know, the shopping cart scene where he's like one shopping cart or maybe he was just walking. I can't remember. But he's like telling about the tuberculosis to the mom, and then there's mirrors that with the other scene where he's shopping with her, and she's just like talking about how great the day is, and he's just had his house flooded, and he's just like sulking, you know. Those two are great, and so that's just my last thoughts on shouting out some little portions of the movie that we hadn't talked about enough.
Totally. And just one more from me before everything, but because we talked about this in the Rough Draft podcast, I want to make sure we talked about it again. The sound editing, sound mixing.
Oh yeah,
right. And we
did.
talked about, or we are talking about right now.
Yeah,
it's hard to not bring up the pie. We talked about it for a whole hour before, and it got ruined. But anyway, when you're outside in like the urban part of Korea, or part of are they in Seoul? I don't know.
Exactly sure.
I don't.
Korea.
I don't
South
remember.
Korea.
Definitely South Korea.
Somewhere.
For sure in South
in a city.
Korea. And they're like in like the urban section, and then when they go into the house, and then they go into the backyard, and then the sound just kind of just right, and it just gets so peaceful and so serene and calm
and isolated.
It's like it not only lets you know about like literally the rich people are like isolating themselves and trying to distance themselves from others, but it also creates like this peaceful moment, you know. And it's like understanding like how like poignant and like nice and pretty like this house is. So it's like it offers like a beacon for the characters to be like, wow, this is like somewhere I want to be. And at the same time it shows you like the double-edged sword of like what this house means.
Yeah.
And so just with the sound mixing, they do so much with that.
Yeah,
know?
I totally agree. I want to like talk a little bit about that too, because in my thoughts, it totally highlights the crossing of boundaries that is so focused on in the main theme of this movie. And the one thing that the park, Mr. Park, talks about, which I love the way that he is a little bit more detached and a little bit more uninvolved and uncaring than Mrs. Park is, but he also kind of like builds his empire a little bit more than Mrs. Park does. She seems like married into richness or something like that, but his disdain is even more palpable and even more disheartening, or like maddening almost, that we don't know exactly if he was born into richness or not, but at least he built something, you know. And yet having built something and gaining more wealth, even if he was wealthy before, makes him so much more disdainful or demeaning. Like him being more demeaning towards the poor makes it even more tragic. And the way that he says that mostly is that like people who cross the line, you know, he talks about crossing the line a lot. And he talks about how the main character, the dad, his smell crosses the line, you know. And that aspect of isolating yourself from the poor and like from even the noise of the city, you know, putting yourself up in that pedestal. Mrs. Park saying that it smells like a subway, even though she hasn't been in a subway for like years, you know. That crossing the boundary is, I think, the most powerful push that if you looked at that, then there is literally no surprise that he got stabbed.
No, totally.
It seems like not a lot, but it says so much about this type of escapism that rich people want. Almost like we were talking about their ignorance, and maybe their only flaw is their ignorance. But I think that whenever you're rich, you want more ignorance and you seek more ignorance, and that activeness is definitely worth getting stabbed over, I guess.
It's like actively ignorant.
Yeah.
Like, I'm working hard to be ignorant.
Yeah.
Like, and you get it, you know? It's like you can see in their scenario, like, yeah, ignorance is bliss for those guys, you know? And it's like a sign of wealth. Like, the more rich you get, the more ignorant you're allowed to be. So, like, like, you can, like, rate people on how rich they are. Like, honestly, I do that. Like, as far as, like, people in general, like, I mean, the nicer way is, like, innocence. But, like, I feel like more innocent people tend to be more rich because they can afford to be more innocent. And
I mean, even taking it literally, like, rich people, rich kids, and getting into really big schools, you know, you don't even you can be ignorant and still get in these schools.
Totally. I mean, yeah, it's like, so, and the sound design can tell you all of that. Mm-hmm. Literally, it can.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just wanted to bring that up because I know everyone talks about the smell, but I couldn't end the podcast without at least mentioning it because I know it's like everyone talks about it, but you gotta. It's such an important part of the movie.
I mean, there's so many so many things. It's like, we gotta talk about this. We gotta like every single scene. I'm like, oh, but like this scene, this scene. I mean, we haven't talked about so many things, but at the same time. We gotta end it at some point.
We did talk an entire hour before this already, so
yeah, totally. So closing thoughts.
I thought that was great. That was pretty much all my closing thoughts. I like tackling. I like tackling that last idea that we had, pushing this relatively less talked about portion of movies in general with sound editing, and then tying that into the biggest core theme of the movie and the biggest I guess double sides of the two families that erupts in the climax of the end. And I think that is my thoughts on the movie as a whole, that they are huge themes that are done so well narratively, that are backed up by even the smallest things like sound editing. So everything's so perfect.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a brilliant, simple shell of a story that's filled with so much expertise and social commentary and direction that absolutely enhances a product that, you know, it basically is a testament to many movies are the same story over and over again, and it's mostly about execution, and this is a great example of one of those things. It has everything you need. It has every little detail is accounted for. Every aspect of this movie that I could think of, if I were to break it down in some way into something, whatever that is that they do is great. Like writing, directing, acting, blah, 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 blah,
everything.
Blah. Yeah, all the way down from the bottom, like the sound mixing, the editing, which is, I mean, not the bottom. But like the things people talk about less, you know? The things that like blocking, sound editing, set design, costume, everything, right? And they do it so well in every sense of the word. So for that, I guess I would give it a rating of a golden turtle.
I mean, if you guys weren't already expecting it, I am also gonna give it a golden turtle.
Our highest award. We already explained this once
out of 10.
And the rough one, but I guess we should.
Yes, that is a 10 out of 10. We're hitting the golden buzzer in our America's Got Talent.
This is our Palme d'Or.
Yes, and I know it's come out pretty soon, I would say, but I think it is a great honor, and there's a lot of other movies that we review that are more recent and stuff like that. These are our picks, you know, so it's a little bit more skewed on the high end.
Yeah, totally.
But that does not diminish how perfect. And if you had watched this far, I don't think you're assuming we're taking this lightly at all. You know, if you watch an hour and 10 minutes in here and we're giving it the golden turtle, you're not like, nah, does it really deserve it? You listen to us talk for an hour, so you know.
I mean, it's not every year that movies like this come out.
Yeah.
Like movies that change the game on every level, like for like the snobbiest of snobs and like just the average movie fans that just watch one or two movies like in theaters a year. Like this movie has something for everyone, and everyone loves this movie. Like, everyone. Except my mom. My mom doesn't like this movie.
Oh no.
It's a whole thing. Like, it's terrible. But, I think this movie's truly special on all levels.
It is completely perfect. And that's all we have to say. All right, bye.
Oh, wait. But like and subscribe.
Oh, yeah, true. Okay.
Yeah,
now. All right, bye.